Joining me now to explain is Jill Wine-Banks, former Watergate Assistant Special Prosecutor and author of The Watergate Girl. So, Jill, it is great to see you. Okay, so the big question is this. Should the January 6th committee make a criminal referral to DOJ against Trump if they indeed have the evidence?
I actually think it would be superfluous, unnecessary. These facts are known to everyone. The Department of Justice is already aware of them. So why take the chance that it could be perceived as politically motivated if there is a prosecution that follows the referral? A referral is necessary when there's an obstruction of Congress and they want a criminal indictment. Congress can't do that. But they don't have to make a referral. The roadmap is already in front of the Department of Justice. And I just don't see any reason for them to do it. There's nothing that will make them act any faster than the facts that we have all seen. The pictures you're showing right now illustrate what happened, and we don't need a referral.
And that puts you in the same camp as Congressman Zoe Lofgren of California, who said, this is a quote in a Politico piece, a referral doesn't mean anything. It has no legal weight whatsoever. Before I move on to the text messages, given your answer, do you think that DOJ, in the various investigations that it's doing, that it will come to the conclusion that a crime was committed and hold those people responsible for the insurrection at the Capitol?
I cannot see how they would fail to do that. The evidence that we see, and they see, of course, much more, but just the evidence that you know by reading the newspaper or watching television shows that crimes were committed, and they weren't just those who invaded the Capitol. There are the people who planned that event, the people who paid for that event, the people who, months before the election, were already planning to undermine the results. Those are crimes against our democracy that need to be pursued. And the evidence now is that the Department of Justice has expanded its investigation beyond just those who went into the Capitol and desecrated it and committed violence that resulted in injury to over 150 police officers, to the deaths of some. I think that they are now moving in the right direction. So I think they can and will and should hold accountable everybody who is responsible for what happened, not just in terms of the danger and the violence, but in terms of the threat to democracy, to overturning the will of the people.
All right, let's talk about these text messages. I want to put up on the screen some of the text messages from Congressman Chip Roy. You say, dude, we need ammo. I read that in the intro, and you see the rest there. But the more colorful one is the one sent on January 6th. This is a blank show. Fix this now. This is to then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. So Jill, shouldn't the January 6th committee start inviting these members of Congress to testify before the committee? And should they be subpoenaed if they don't voluntarily testify?
I think that every American citizen who has any evidence should be subpoenaed. And I don't think that being a congressman or a senator allows you to evade that. I do have a slightly different reading of those text messages than many other commentators.
Yeah.
I think that they were asking in that we need ammo, we need fraud examples. They were asking for facts. They heard all of the accusations of fraud in the election, but they weren't seeing it. They saw 60 cases being lost in court. They were asking for actual facts. And I think that I'm confirmed in that by the fact that at the end, they said, this is a S show, and did not vote to overturn the will of the people because there was no evidence of any fraud. So I don't quite read it in the same way as everybody else. Yes, in the beginning, they were definitely for fighting for the president in any way possible. They even wanted Sidney Powell to be taken into consideration and used and then Eastman when the White House didn't involve Sidney Powell. So they were certainly willing to go along, but that's because they were being advised that there was actually fraud. There was no fraud. They came to see there was no fraud, and they, both the two text people that we're talking about now,
right.
Senator Lee and Chip Roy, did not vote to overturn the will of the people.
And
so I read it differently.
Right. And you know what, Jill, now that you point that out, that was the impression I got as well, is that they were looking for fraud. They were asking, give us the evidence, and it never came. And that's when they were like, fix this.